There are over 10,000 ranger stations scattered across America's wilderness. Most of them are abandoned, and there's a reason nobody talks about why. Tonight, I'm taking you inside 4 ranger stations that were left behind, not because of budget cuts, not because of relocation, because something happened that made people walk away and never come back. Subscribe if you're new, and let's jump into the stories. When we climbed to the abandoned fire tower, the pot of water was still boiling. I'm a conservation officer from Alberta Parks, and in August 2006, I was part of a team sent to investigate why a 70-year-old fire lookout named Stephanie Stewart had missed her morning radio check-in. Stephanie had worked the Athabasca lookout tower for 18 years. She was a fixture up there, lived alone all summer in a 12 by 12 cabin perched on a 70-foot tower, watching for smoke. She was reliable, tough, the kind of woman who climbed Kilimanjaro at 65 just to prove she could. But when she didn't call in on August the 26th, we knew something was wrong. The tower was 40 miles into the wilderness, accessible only by a logging road. It took us 3 hours to reach the base, and by the time we started climbing the wooden stairs, my gut was already tight with dread. The first thing I noticed was the smell. Propane, strong enough that I thought maybe the tank had leaked. Then I saw the blood, a smear of it, dark and dried, streaked across the porch railing like someone had dragged a hand along it while stumbling. More on the steps, droplets, not splatter, deliberate movement, not violence. My partner, Greg, a younger officer with less field experience, stopped halfway up the stairs. "Should we call this in?" "We're already here," I said. "Let's see what we're dealing with." The cabin door was unlocked. I pushed it open slowly, and the smell hit me harder. Not just propane, but something metallic and sour. Inside, the space was exactly as you'd expect. A single room with a cot, a small table, a propane stove, and a radio console. Everything neat, organised, lived in. Well, except for the pot. It was sitting on the stove, still warm, steam rising faintly. The propane tank beneath it was nearly empty, hissing softly. I turned the burner off and lifted the lid. Water, just water, like she'd been making tea and just walked away mid-boil. That's when Greg found the bed. "Mike," he said, his voice tight, "look at this." The cot was made, but the bedding was wrong. The mattress had sheets, but no blanket, no pillows, and when I checked the small storage trunk under the bed, I found something even stranger. Stephanie's winter sleeping bag was there, neatly folded. So were her spare clothes, her toiletries, her personal journal. But missing were 2 pillows, a comforter, a top bedsheet, and a gold wristwatch she always wore. Greg was scanning the cabin, his flashlight cutting through the dim light. "Why would she take her bedding and leave everything else here?" I didn't have an answer, but I had a theory. Bedding is what you use to wrap a body. We searched the area around the tower for hours. No sign of Stephanie, no disturbed earth, no drag marks, just the blood on the porch and the missing items. When the RCMP arrived the next day, they brought Cavalier dogs. The dogs circled the tower, noses to the ground, but never alerted. Stephanie's truck was still parked at the base, keys in the ignition. Her radio was functional, no distress call had been made. She had just vanished. The official theory was abduction. Someone had come to the tower, attacked her, wrapped her body in the bedding, and carried her off into the wilderness. But that theory has problems. First, the tower stairs were old, rotten in places. Anybody carrying a body down 70 feet of unstable wood in the middle of the night would have made noise, would have left marks. We found neither. Second, the blood. There wasn't enough of it. If she'd been attacked, there would have been more. Splatter, smears, signs of a struggle. this was controlled bleeding, deliberate. And third, the watch. Stephanie wore that watch every single day. It had belonged to her mother. She never took it off. Why would someone abducting her bother to remove it? The case went cold. 18 years later, it's still unsolved. Stephanie's body was never found. The tower was abandoned and eventually condemned, too unstable to use. But here's what I never told anyone. 3 months after Stephanie disappeared, I went back to the tower, alone. I'm not sure why. Maybe closure, maybe guilt. I wanted to see it one more time before the park surface tore it down. It was early December. Snow had started to fall and the logging road was barely passable. I parked at the base and I started up the stairs with my flashlight, my breath fogging in the freezing air. Halfway up, I noticed something that made me stop cold. Boot prints. Fresh boot prints in the snow, leading up the stairs. They were small, maybe a woman's size 7 or 8, the same size as Stephanie's. I followed them up. They led to the porch, to the exact spot where we found the blood, and then they stopped. Not at the door, not going back down, just stopped, like whoever made them had just stood there on the porch and stepped off into the thin air. I checked the ground below. No boots, no turbulence in the snow, nothing. I left the tower that day and never went back. But every August the 26th, the anniversary of Stephanie's disappearance, I get a call from dispatch centre. It's always the same. A hiker reports seeing smoke from the Athabasca Lookout Tower. When rangers investigate, there's no fire, the tower is empty, but someone always leaves fresh boot prints in the dirt, size 7, women's, leading up the stairs and stopping at the porch every single year. The first thing I found when I opened the abandoned ranger station was the logbook. The final entry was dated June the 21st. It was July. I'm a seasonal backcountry ranger for Sequoia and Kings Canyon National Parks, and in the summer of 2001, I was assigned to reopen the Bench Lake Station after it had been closed for 5 years. The previous ranger, a guy named Randy who'd worked there for nearly 3 decades, had gone missing in 1996. They'd searched for weeks, found nothing, and eventually the station had just stayed shut. Until me. The park service had finally decided to reopen it, and I was the rookie who got the assignment. 23 years old, fresh out of college, eager to prove myself. I thought finding an old logbook would be interesting, a piece of history. I didn't expect it to haunt me. The station was exactly as Randy had left it, a small wood cabin at 10,000 feet, surrounded by alpine lakes and granite peaks. Inside, a cot, a desk, a foot locker, and shelves stacked with emergency supplies. Everything neat, organised, untouched. The logbook was sitting open on the desk, a pen still lying across the page like he just set it down. I picked it up and I started reading. The entries were routine at first, weather reports, trail conditions, notes about hikers he'd helped. Randy's handwriting was clean, methodical, he recorded everything. But as I flipped through the pages, the tone started to change. June the 15th, 1996. Radio's been out for 2 days. Tried switching to backup frequency. No response. Will attempt repair tomorrow. June the 17th, 1996. Still no contact. Hiked to ridge to get line of sight. Radio worked for 30 seconds, then cut out. Heard static. Thought I heard my name. June the 19th, 1996. 6 days without contact. How long before they come to look? June the 20th, 1996. There's a policy, right? A safety net. 8 days and counting. June the 21st, 1996. After all these years of being a ranger, I wonder if it's been worth it. That was the last entry, but it was dated June the 21st, and according to the instant report I read before arriving, Randy had disappeared on July the 21st, a month later. I stared at the date, trying to make sense of it. A mistake? A slip of the pen? Randy had been out here alone for weeks. Maybe he just lost track of days. But something felt wrong. I checked the rest of the station. On a shelf near the cot, I found Randy's field desk. A wooden box with drawers and cubby holes. Inside were stacks of park service manuals, a few citations, some personal notes, and at the bottom, a locked footlocker. The key was hanging on the nail by the door. Inside the footlocker was a Smith & Wesson .357 Magnum. Standard issue for backcountry rangers. It was still loaded, the metal cleaned and oiled. Randy had left it behind. That detail stuck with me. If Randy had gone on patrol and gotten hurt, he wouldn't have left his gun, unless he didn't plan on coming back. I radioed the district office, told them what I found. They said they'll send someone to pick up the logbook and the gun. In the meantime, I was supposed to stay put, get the station operational, and start my patrol rotations. So I did. For the next 3 months, I lived in Randy's cabin, slept in his cot, used his desk, wrote in a new logbook, and every night, before I went to bed, I'd open Randy's old journal and reread that final entry. After all these years of being a ranger, I wonder if it's been worth it. It felt like a goodbye, like he'd already made up his mind. In September, I got a call over the radio. They'd found Randy. His body was at the bottom of a gorge near Window Peak, about 8 miles from the station. He'd been there for 5 years, partially buried under rockfall and snow. The park service said it looked like he'd fallen, maybe trying to cross a waterfall, accidental death. But here's what they didn't tell the public. When they recovered Randy's body, they found his radio. It was sitting on top of the waterfall, not at the bottom with him, on the top, like someone had placed it there. And in Randy's jacket pocket, folded in a tight square, was the final page of his logbook. The one with the wrong date, the one that said, "I wonder if it's been worth it." He'd torn it out, carried it with him. I stayed at Bench Lake for 2 more seasons after that, and every time I opened Randy's old logbook, I'd stare at that last entry and try to figure out what he meant. Did he walk into the wilderness knowing he wasn't coming back? Did he stage his own death? Or did something else happen out there? Something that made him leave the gun behind, tear out that page, and walk into the mountains with it in his pocket? I'll never know. But here's what keeps me up at night. Last summer, I was reassigned to a different station in the park. A younger ranger took over Bench Lake, and 2 weeks ago, I got a call from the district office. They said the new ranger had found something. Randy's logbook was back on his desk, the same one, same handwriting, same final entry dated June the 21st, but there was a new line beneath it, written in different ink, different handwriting. It said, "He's not alone anymore." We found the cache 3 miles off any marked trail, buried under a cairn of stones that looked older than the forest itself. I'm a wilderness ranger in the Bridger Teton National Forest, Wyoming. I've been working these mountains for 15 years. I know every emergency supply cache, every ranger station, every hidden shelter within a few 100 miles of here. I've memorized the maps, I've walked the grids. This cache wasn't on any of them. It was late September, and my partner Jake and I were doing a seasonal sweep before the first snow. We'd been hiking for 6 hours when Jake stopped, stared at something off the trail. A pile of flat stones, maybe 4 feet high, arranged in a perfect spiral. "That's not natural," he said. We approached slowly. The stones were smooth, river rock, deliberately stacked. At the center, partially hidden under the top layer, was a rusted metal ammo box. Jake looked at me. "You ever seen this before?" I shook my head. "It's not in the database." We lifted the stones one by one. The ammo box was heavy, sealed tight with decades-old duct tape that had crumbled when it peeled back. Inside, wrapped in oil cloth, was a collection of supplies: waterproof matches, a first aid kit with expiration dates from the 1970s, an emergency blanket still in its packaging, and a leather-bound journal. The journal was the kind you'll buy at a general store, with a worn cover and pages yellowed by time. On the first page, written in neat block letters, was a warning. "If you found this, don't open it. Just leave it here." Jake laughed nervously. "Little too late for that." I turned the page anyway. The entries were sparse, dated between June and August of 1973. The handwriting was steady at first, clinical almost, like someone documenting a routine patrol. But as the pages went on, the writing got tighter, more frantic. June the 14th, 1973. Build emergency cache. Standard supplies. Will check quarterly. July the 2nd, 1973. Something is wrong with the lights. I thought they were stars at first. They're not. They move in patterns, circles, always circles. July 19th, 1973. Found boot prints around my tent this morning. Size 10, same as mine, but I was in the tent, alone. August the 3rd, 1973. Can't leave. Tried 3 times. Keep ending up back here. Compass is spinning. Radio's dead. If you're reading this, don't follow the lights. They're not stars. That was the last entry. Jake and I stood there in the fading afternoon light, the journal open between us. The coordinates on the first page were scribbled in pencil, just a note beneath them. Emergency rally point. If lost, go here. JT. JT, Jake muttered. You know any rangers with those initials? I didn't, but something about the handwriting felt familiar. We marked the cache on our GPS and continued the sweep. By the time we got back to headquarters, the sun had set and a light snow was falling. I filed a report about the cache and sent the coordinates to the district supervisor, along with scans of the journal pages. 2 days later, I got a call. David, my supervisor said, his voice tight. We ran those coordinates, and they led to a valley about 8 miles northwest of where you found the cache. It's been closed to the public since 1974. We're sending a recovery team. A recovery team? For what? He didn't answer right away. Then, just don't go back there. Not until we know what we're dealing with. I ignored him. 3 days later, Jake and I hiked to the coordinates. It took us 6 hours through heavy brush and steep switchbacks to reach the valley. It was a basin really, ringed by cliffs, with a frozen creek running through the centre. The snow had started to accumulate and our boots crunched loudly in the silence. That's when we saw them. 6 bodies, arranged in a perfect circle, facing outwards. They were skeletal, clothing rotted away, but their positions were unmistakable. Sitting upright, legs crossed, hands resting on their knees like they'd been meditating. At the centre of the circle was a flat stone, chest high, with 2 letters carved deep into the surface. JT. Jake stumbled backwards. What the hell is this? I didn't answer. I was staring at the bodies, at their boots, size 10, all of them. We called it in. The recovery team arrived the next day with forensic specialists and a historian from the park surface. They identified the remains through dental records and old missing person reports. All 6 had been reported missing between 1971 and 1973. Hikers, hunters, a geology student, all disappeared from different locations, miles apart. No connection between them. except one. The DNA on the stone marker, the one with the initials JT, matched a Forest Service ranger named James Torrance. He'd gone missing in August 1970 while on a solo backcountry patrol. But here's the part that made my blood run cold. James Torrance's signature appeared on duty logs through September 1974, 4 years after he died. Someone kept signing in for him for 4 years, filling out patrol records, filling out patrol reports, checking equipment, logging radio contact. The Park Service never found out who. And last month, while digitising old records, they found something else. A patrol report dated August the 15th, 1973, signed by James Torrance. It was filed the same day as his final journal entry, the one warning about the lights. The report said everything was normal, routine patrol, no incidents. But at the bottom, in pencil, barely visible, was a single line. They made me write this. The ranger station had been abandoned for 44 years. When we opened the door, there was fresh coffee in the pot. I'm a demolition contractor for the National Park Service. My crew and I were hired to tear down an old ranger station in Arizona's Chihuahua National Monument. The place had been sitting empty since 1980, when a ranger named Paul Fugate walked out for a routine trail check and just never came back. No body, no evidence, no explanation, just gone. The Park Service had kept the station locked up for decades, like a time capsule. Now they wanted it demolished before it collapsed on its own. My job was to empty it out, document everything, and tear it down. I expected dust, cobwebs, decay. I didn't expect it to look like someone had just left for lunch. The door was locked, but the key worked smoothly. When I stepped inside, the first thing that hit me was the smell. Not rot, not mildew, coffee, fresh coffee. On the desk was a Mr. Coffee machine, the kind from the 1970s with the old warming plate. It was plugged in. The glass carafe had about 2 inches of black liquid at the bottom, still warm to the touch. I called my crew over. "Did any of you come in here before me?" They all shook their heads. The station had been locked since the 1980s. The Park Service had given me the only key. I checked the breaker box. The power had been disconnected in 1982. The coffee maker shouldn't have been working at all, but it was. We started cataloguing the contents. Everything was meticulously preserved. A ranger uniform hung on the coat hook by the door, the fabric faded but intact. On the desk, a badge, a nameplate that read Paul B. Fugate, Park Ranger, and a stack of paperwork dated January 1980. A calendar on the wall was frozen on January the 13th, the day Paul disappeared. It looked like a museum exhibit, like someone had carefully staged the scene and then walked away. Then we found the journal. It was hidden under a loose floorboard in the corner of the room. Not buried, just tucked beneath the wood, like someone had wanted it to be found eventually but not right away. The cover was leather, worn smooth, and inside were pages of handwritten entries. The first few pages were standard ranger logs, patrol notes, wildlife sightings, weather conditions, but about halfway through, the tone changed. December 20, 1979. This job isn't what I thought it would be. 12 years in, and I'm still fighting the same battles. The bureaucracy, the politics. I wanted to protect the wilderness. Instead, I write citations. January the 5th, 1980. Dodie asked me what I'd do if I could start over. I told her I'd disappear. She thought I was joking. January the 12th, 1980. If you're reading this, I made it out. I'm not missing. I left on purpose. But if anyone asks, tell them I'm still on patrol. Some of us choose to stay. Beneath that entry, carved into the wooden floor, were names and dates, dozens of them, scratched into the planks with a knife or a nail. I crouched down and read them. James Torrance, 1970. Daniel Hoskins, 1983. Laura Chen, 1991. Randy Morgenson, 1996. And Michael Torres, 2003. The list went on. 15 names in total, all rangers, all reported missing in national parks across the western United States. I took photos of everything and I called the Park Service immediately. Within hours, a team of investigators descended on the site. They cross-referenced the names with missing person databases. Every single one matched. 15 park rangers spread across 33 years, all reported missing under mysterious circumstances. No bodies, no evidence, just vanished. And every single name had been carved into Paul Fugate's floor. The investigators brought in forensic specialists. They ran DNA tests on the coffee residue, fingerprints, anything they could find. The coffee was less than 12 hours old. The prints on the carafe belonged to Paul Fugate, but Paul had been missing for 44 years. The FBI opened a cold case investigation. They interviewed Paul's widow, now in her 80s. She told them something I'll never forget. Paul used to say that the wilderness kept people, she said quietly. He said some rangers went in so deep they forgot how to come out. And after a while, they didn't want to. She showed them something else, a letter she received 2 weeks after Paul disappeared. It had been postmarked from Phoenix, 200 miles away. Inside was a single sentence, written in Paul's handwriting. I'm not missing, I'm free. The Park Service never released the full findings. Officially, the investigation is still open. The station was demolished as planned and the floorboards with the carved names were removed and archived. But here's what I can't stop thinking about. A month after we tore down the station, I was working another demolition job in Montana. An old fire lookout tower, abandoned since the 1990s. Same deal, locked for decades, nobody inside. When I opened the door, there was fresh coffee on the desk, and beneath the floorboards, more names, 23 of them, including 3 from Chiricahua that hadn't been on Paul's floor. The most recent name was dated 2 months ago. I didn't tell anyone this time. I just took photos, pocketed the floorboard, and walked away. Because here's what I think is happening. Somewhere out there, in the deep wilderness where maps don't reach and the radios don't work, there's a network. Rangers who left, rangers who choose to stay, and every few years, someone new decides they've had enough of the world and just joins them. Paul wasn't the first one, and he sure as hell wasn't the last. I keep that floorboard in my garage now, and sometimes, late at night, I take it out and stare at the names, wondering if mine would be next.